What's going on today, Internet Selfish here with Retrospect. Today we are going to take another look at the RGB30. And not only are we going to enhance the way that it looks, but we're also going to change the way that it performs. So when all said and done, it should look a little like this and perform a little differently. Let's take a look. The first thing we're going to do is put down a cloth so that we don't scratch up our screen when we have it face down here on our workspace. Now, you're going to find through this video, I'm going to forget that many times. There are 4 screws here on the back, so we're going to take those out real quick. It's a pretty easy process. Get these 4 screws out. That way we have access to the device itself. Grab yourself a guitar pick type tool. And don't forget to take out your SD cards. And find yourself a seam somewhere. Now, if you can't find a seam, usually around the shoulder buttons like I do here, you're usually able to pry it apart because that is an open spot where there's some separation between where the casing is clipped in. So go into that space there and take it out there. All right, now that we got it pulled apart, so as we separate it, there are 4 wires that are connected to the back of the device that we need to disconnect before actually completely separating it. And you're gonna see those wires here. 2 of them for speakers, one's the battery, and then the other one is your Wi-Fi antenna. You gotta wait to take out the Wi-Fi antenna until you have the back of the device laying flat. It is a little bit longer and it is closer to the edge. And I've honestly never seen an antenna like this one in particular before. It's interesting how they have it just taped there. That's something new. So there's that Wi-Fi antenna, just unplug it, it just pops right off. No big deal, it's just sitting on that post. Now you're gonna wanna take out your shoulder buttons. Get those out of the way, make sure you know where they are. I always like to keep mine separated, you don't need to do that though. And now next we're gonna unhook the joysticks. Now you could leave the joysticks in, but since we're gonna be replacing them with Hall sticks, we're just gonna pull them out right away. But you'll notice when I put it back together that I'll actually put the joysticks in before I put the board in. It's really kind of personal preference. It probably would have actually been easier if I would have just waited to put the joysticks in while putting it back together as well. The reason being is the connectors for them kind of gets wedged underneath the board. I'm making sure it doesn't have one of those stickers on the top. I don't know if you watched my 35XXH video, but I put everything together and realized there's stickers on top of the joysticks in order to prevent daylight from passing through. So I had to pull them back apart and do it. So I was checking to see if these had those stickers. I'd never seen it before, but who knows? Maybe that'll be a new thing. And now I'm just counting out. So just pointed out all the screws on here. And I just need to take those out real quick. There is a handful of them around the outside. It's pretty much all on the edge. So just go around the edge and you'll find them all. So yeah, just go around that edge. And then unhook the screen. That's what this is right down here. Now, you could do it with your fingers too, which actually is probably the best way to do it. But if you're gonna use a tool, don't use metal. If you're gonna cause damage to that ribbon cable, you are going to do it using a metal tool. They're pretty durable, but metal tools slice right through them. So you wanna make sure you don't have a metal tool there. Our pads for our switches were stuck to the bottom of the board, so I just cleaned them up real quick, made sure they weren't too slippery. Pull out some new buttons here. This will be our D-pad and our start and select buttons. We're also going to be replacing the face buttons here. So get those out. Now, I thought I needed the little pieces of tape on the back of the start and select buttons. I screwed around with it for a while, then I realized tape is on there just to hold them in while they're putting it together. So there's really no other need for it. It's just there so that they don't fall into the device while they're trying to put it together on the assembly line, which is genius because sometimes I end up taping them from the outside to hold them in. So we got that D-pad in there. And then this is like 4 little corners you guys got to push in around the outside. They just pop right in on their own, really. Make sure they're in here. Now we got some Sakura Mod PlayStation buttons we got going on here. I've used these on a few different devices recently. I actually meant to go with Super NES on this device instead of PlayStation, but I couldn't find everything I was looking for, so we ended up going PlayStation. And then, of course, the Super NES stuff started popping up right after I had already ordered everything. So we're going to stick with it. Maybe we'll do another RGB30 or maybe the RGB20SX when we get it. Maybe we'll look at doing Super NES or something on that device. All right, so just looking for that other pad. We're going to put that on there. Now for now, we're pretty much done with the front of the device, at least for now. So now I'm just going to set this aside, just so it's not in my way. Flip the board over here. Now we're going to do a little something we haven't done before. So we're going to add something to this. We're going to put a rumble motor on here. This board's actually designed for a rumble motor. It just doesn't have one. So if you see down here it says motor, and you have your positive and negative terminals, and the motor goes on that white spot right there. So they're all set up for it. And we're actually going to put 2 of them on here. So we're just going to wire up to the other side. You should probably test these real quick. They do come in big batches for a reason. A lot of times they don't work. In fact, during this, I had one of them shake its own wire out. So I just test both the motors here real quick. And of course, I couldn't find any of my stuff to solder when I went to do this, so I had to run to the local hardware store. So I got some flux that's definitely not made for this, but it did okay. And I had my solder iron and my solder, but I also didn't have any of my wire. Of course, I found it today. So I filmed this over a week ago. I found the wire today. So I guess for the next one, I've got the right wire. I ended up having to run 2 blue wires because they were smaller. Otherwise, I wasn't positive I was going to be able to close everything up or everything was going to fit right or it wasn't going to rattle around. But before I do that, what I wanted to do real quick was kind of do that D-pad hack where you make a square on the D-pad just so you can get rid of some of those accidental diagonals. I did not cut this straight at all, and you'll see this. It's an absolutely terrible job with this D-pad hack here. I almost ordered a sticker for it, but I just said, screw it, I'm just going to do it. And I was like, oh, I guess I'll just see how it works. And I realized that it just needs to be straight over the actual sensors themselves, which makes sense. It's kind of a mess when it's done, but it still works out. The diagonals are great now. I mean, they weren't, I don't know, everybody complains about it. I think that just adding that other D-pad maybe helped a little bit, maybe. I'm not sure. But this definitely was the icing on the cake. It all worked out for me. You can kind of see my ADHD catching up to my frustration while I'm trying to cut this tape. Man, it was a pain in the butt. And I probably should have used a razor blade, but, you know, who was going to go look for a razor blade? I also had to shoot this in multiple sittings over multiple days just because I had things going on. And so I had to leave my desk with all this crap on it, and so I was really eager to get it done. And I really wanted to see how it all turned out, so instead of moving on to the next device, I just kind of plowed through it, and that's why we're doing a voiceover today, because none of the audio matches up at all. So hopefully this matches up a little bit better. It's more explains better. Wow, I can't talk today. So that's why this is more narrative driven. I'm just going to leave that right in so that I'm not the only one suffering here. Sometimes it takes a tiny little X-Acto knife to do a big little job. I think this might be a good time to take a pause and let you know that I am not in any way an electrician. So don't do anything that I do, because most of the stuff I'm doing wrong, I just know how to make it work. It's definitely not going to be the right way. Anything you do it at your own risk. Don't look to me. I'm not a role model, and I'm definitely not an electrician. Let's carry on. All right, well, it is time to get our flux on and move along here on this soldering process. It doesn't take very long. It's going to feel like ages, though, watching it here. I don't have a whole lot to say about it, but I'm using flux for lead pipes, not for electronics, but they are more or less the same. They're both lead-free, which most solder is now, unless you got some old-school solder sitting around, and if you do, keep that stuff. Hold it near and dear to your heart. If you've never soldered before, this is probably one of the easier solder jobs you possibly could do. It's probably a good learning job. Maybe practice on some PCB or something beforehand if you can get some practice PCB, but really all you gotta do is heat it up. The flux will kind of take over, and then you just touch the solder to it. If it's warm, it'll just make the pucks for you. It'll put these little solder welds in there for you. No problem. And if you're wondering why I don't have the motors in my hand right now, it's because I'm trying to put solder on the board first. It'll make it really easy. So all we have to do is heat that up with the wires there, and then the wires will just seat right into that solder that's already on there. Instead of trying to feed it solder all at one time, this will already be set up for you. So when you go to do it, just heat up that piece of solder that's already there, and then just put it right there in that solder, and she'll stick like she had a good time last night. This is one of those only times in life where I really give a flux. Just kidding. Yeah, you have to put flux over the top of the solder once it's cool. That'll also help do the same thing it did the first time. Makes the solder more like malleable and work faster. I don't know what the right terms are. It turns into liquid a lot faster with that flux on there. Now, if you're a caffeine drinker like I am, you want to make sure you have that before you go to solder, because I was shaking like a fish, so that makes it really hard, because you don't want to solder the wrong one on the wrong one. This would be a good time to mention too, closest to the dot is the blue, furthest away is the red. It really doesn't matter. These aren't positive, negative, polar, but if you read the directions, it tells you that the blue wire goes closest to where the motor sticks on, and the red wire goes to the other side. This wire I got from the hardware store is definitely too thick for the project I'm working on, which is when I decided that don't copy what I'm doing, but I'm going to use 2 blue wires just to have smaller wires in there. Again, I'm not sure if they're going to jingle around or if they're going to get stuck or wedged or whatever when you close the top. I didn't want to deal with it. I mean, what's on the other side of that? The battery? You know, you kind of want to be a little bit careful. You just want to strip the ends of the wires, and then what I did is tape them together, at least for the process of putting everything together here, just so that they weren't flopping around. And since they are 2 individual wires, it just made it easier to work with. Probably should have taped in the middle instead of like at one end, but not a big deal. Once you get them all taped together, then you're going to want to get ready to flux them, because you're going to want to put flux on these just like we did with the PCB. And while you're not giving a flux, you might as well flux the PCB again as well, so that these wires can just sink right in there. It might be a little hard to see when I'm doing this. I actually loaded the soldering iron with some solder, and now I'm just touching it to the wires. With that flux, it's just pouring right onto the wires, and it really does a good job of kind of sealing them up and holding the wires and everything together for you. Now grab your flat snips or side cutters or whatever you have for cutting your wires and your solder or whatever you need to cut while you're doing this process. And what I do is make them even. This makes it a lot easier to work with when everything is the same length. That way you do the same process for everything. So I just went through, cut all the ends of the wires. Now just grab your motor and grab your wire, heat up the wire, hold the wire for the motor right onto that other wire. As the solder starts to melt, it will pretty much immediately get attached to it, and then just pull away, and it'll cool fast enough where you can literally just pull away from it and it will be attached. I forgot to mention before, but I put some heat shrink over the blue wires prior to doing the solder, and so I just slid it up and then I used a lighter to shrink it on. That way there's not any exposed wires or anything like that that could jump over to the PCB or whatever else might happen in the elements inside of the handheld. Now if you do something as stupid as I did and use the same color wires, run down the wires, make sure that you have the correct wire so you're still matching up blue to blue and red to red, and then get them soldered in. All you gotta do is heat up that solder again. Remember, we did put flux on there, so it does get melty pretty easily. Once it starts to melt, gets to temp, as you can see right there, then we're just gonna let go just like we did with the other one, and she's gonna be stuck right there. Checked her out, made sure she was good. Now I'm realizing that I forgot to include the part where I cut these wires shorter, because I actually had to take these off and do it again, so I actually used not the PCB side, but the side that had motor on it. I cut those wires shorter and redid that side, but we didn't get to see that. Now here's where I debated whether it was a good time to put in the Hall Effect sticks or if I should wait to put in the Hall Effect sticks. I wasn't really sure if I should wait till the PCB was in or not, but since I was doing this as parts were coming in over the course of a couple days, I decided that I was just going to put the Hall sticks in here. Now if you're going to do this like I did, I probably wouldn't recommend doing it this way, but if you're going to do it this way, be wary of the ribbon cables coming off the Hall Effect sticks and make sure they don't get stuck underneath the PCB, because that's what happened to me. Mine got stuck underneath the PCB, and I had to screw around with them for a while to get them out from underneath the PCB, and then it was like, man, I should have just waited to put those things in. It would have been way easier. Now, when putting the display ribbon cable back in, either use your fingers or use something like a porcelain tweezers or something, just to make sure you're not using metal on there, because that is what is susceptible to damage if you use metal on it. They just slice right through. Also, this one does have a line on it, so it actually tells you if it's in the crooked or not, which is kind of nice, which I realized while I was doing it. Something to observe to make it easier for you. So now I realized while editing that in my getting up and multiple days working on this, I never actually recorded finishing putting it back together, but there is that handful of screws that you took out before, and that's pretty much it. Then make sure you plug those 4 wires back in, including your Wi-Fi. Probably Wi-Fi first. It's probably the easiest way to do it. I apologize that I'm missing that, but it goes back in the same way that it came out. I decided I've never tried putting a wrap on a retro handheld before. I've done it on plenty of other things, so I got one of these from Sakura Mods, and it's a PlayStation wrap, so we're going to put that on there. here and give it that PlayStation vibe that all my handhelds seem to have lately. And again, I tried to get a SNES one, but there wasn't one on there at the time, and then literally the day after I ordered it, it popped up. But that's okay. We'll save that for another project. If you're wondering why I've got my knife out is I'm trying to get the screen cover off because apparently the sticker doesn't fit with the screen cover, and I just put the screen cover on like 3 days ago as part of this whole process. So I'm a little bummed, and now I'm debating whether I should have put the sticker over the screen cover, but it is what it is. It's done. It's over with. We're moving on. I'm trying to decide if I actually like this when I get it done because there is a gap on the top and the bottom. So I've decided this was probably made specifically for a white RGB30, but I think it still kind of looks cool because it adds like some accents to it. Like I was already trying to accent the red by doing the stick covers and the D-pad and everything else. So I was trying to really accent the red with the white so that it kind of pulled some of the red back through from the device, just because I think the red looking device looks cool anyways. But I'm not really sure about those gaps there. I haven't made up my mind yet. Let me know what you think about the gaps in the comment section down below. I don't just make these things for myself. Would love your input. Make sure your screen is nice and squeaky clean, and then we're going to throw on some stick covers, which will probably get our screen dirty again while we do it, but hey, you know, it's part of the game. You got to clean that screen. These little mushroom caps actually kind of fought me a little bit because of the grooves around on the RGB30. Now, if you're not already on ArkOS, I'm going to leave a link down below that will get you right to GitHub for ArkOS. Scroll down to the RGB30, and then you can either choose GitHub or whatever it is in order to download it. I would immediately, after installing it, onto a new SD card, run an update because there is an update available for it. For some reason, on ArkOS, it's not the updated version that you download, but you can do it directly over Wi-Fi once you get the OS installed. I'll also leave a link on here to their FAQ. And down on line item 36, it's actually how to do the install for the vibration motors that I did, if you're somebody who learns better by text. Now that you get the newest version of ArkOS installed, hit the start button, go into settings, go down to advanced settings, and then scroll all the way to the bottom, and the last option on there should be to enable the rumble motor. Now your RGB30 has good vibrations. I spent some time scrolling around in my head trying to figure out what games actually have vibrate that would be available in the systems that work on this, and I remembered that the Game Boy Advance could vibrate. Then I couldn't remember what games had vibrate on them, so I had to do a little Googling to find a game in order to test out the vibrate. But it works. It works great. In fact, it worked too good, and I ended up opening this back up the next day and removing one of the motors, the secondary one that I put in there, so kind of a waste of time. So it's up to you if you want to have two. These are 3-volt motors, so it does take some battery if you're playing something that vibrates a lot. And I can use that battery life for something else other than vibration. Even though the vibration's cool, one motor alone is plenty. Just ask your damn it selfish kids watch this sometimes. While I'm over here scolding myself, I'd like to know your thoughts on this project and this style of editing for me. This is different. I'm not sure if I'm sold on it yet, but it might be a good way to get the point across when we do some more complex projects like this that are a little bit more than just a software update or something like that for viewers that maybe don't know how to do it. Otherwise, what I was going to do, or what I could do in the future on a video like this, is just show everything getting connected and not the process to get there, which I'd be fine with as well. So I'd love to hear your input in the comment section down below. And that's all I got for you today. So if you'd please comment, rate, subscribe, share this video with your friends because sharing helps grow the channel. And I'm more of a grower than a shower, so I could use some help here. And while you're at it, take a look at one of these videos that YouTube put up on the screen that they say that you're gonna like. That's what they say. So I would trust them. I don't know why I would trust them. I wouldn't trust them with my, well, we do trust them with our data. Yeah, so I would trust them with my video picks. So one of these two videos here, they say you're gonna like. Probably both of them. They actually picked both of them for you. Anyways, that's all I got for today. I'm out. Bye-bye!